It's time for a change for both of us.
Dad, we're men, okay? That means a few things. We like to shit with the door open. We talk about pussy. We go on riverboat gambling trips. We make our own beef jerky. That's what we do.
Tonight, we welcome to the show Adam McKay, screenwriter, producer, director, dare I say, political provocateur. After being one of the founding members of the Upright Citizens Brigade in 1990, along with Amy Poehler and Horatio Sands, among many others, Adam became a writer at Saturday Night Live in 1995, and within a year was head writer. He also encouraged his friend Tina Fey to submit scripts to SNL, and she was hired as a writer in 1997 and would succeed Adam as head writer. 1995 was the year of the cast overhaul at SNL, bringing in Will Ferrell, David Koechner, Nancy Walls, and Daryl Hammond. During his time at SNL, Adam is credited with developing the SNL Digital Shorts brand. Will Ferrell and Adam would continue to collaborate through their time at SNL, and then with Adam leaving in 2001 and Will leaving in 2002, they began an impressive run of movies together.
Huh, you're a real hooker, and I'm gonna slap you in public.
You have man boobs.
You've got a dirty, whorish mouth. That's what you have. I'm gonna punch you in the ovary. That's what I'm gonna do. A straight shot.
They co-wrote and Adam directed Anchorman, The Legend of Ron Burgundy in 2004, the first of a string of highly successful comedies that they co-wrote together. In 2006, Will Ferrell and Adam founded Gary Sanchez Productions, which would allow them to write and produce Talladega Nights, The Ballad of Ricky Bobby, Step Brothers, and The Other Guys.
I'm not gonna call him Dad.
Brennan, you're 39 years old. I would not expect you to call him Dad.
Well, I'm not going to, ever. Even if there's a fire.
It also helped co-found Funny or Die, the user-generated comedy video site. And in 2009, McKay and Ferrell produced Danny McBride's show Eastbound and Down on HBO. After all of these very funny early comedies, largely directed at a mainstream audience, Adam McKay turned his comedic sensibilities towards a more directly political satire, starting with The Big Short, based on Michael Lewis's book about the guys who bet on the 2008 financial crash, which we actually discussed earlier this year during our Monday Night Extravaganza month, starring Christian Bale, Steve Carell, Ryan Gosling, Brad Pitt, Marissa Tomei, and a pre-Kendall Roy, Jeremy Strong, as some of the worst people in America who happened to get it right.
We have no confidence in your ability to identify macroeconomic trends.
You flew here to tell me that? Why? Anyone can see that there's a real estate bubble.
Actually, no one can see a bubble. That's what makes it a bubble.
That's dumb, Lauren.
Followed by the 2018 Dick Cheney biopic Vice, starring a transformed Christian Bale as Dick Cheney and Steve Carell as Donald Rumsfeld. A look at how Cheney consolidated power over 30 years. I'm glad we never saw that guy on the campaign trail again.
By all accounts of what people saw in that room on that terrible day, there was confusion, fear, uncertainty. But Dick Cheney saw something else that no one else did. He saw an opportunity.
And the 2021 climate apocalypse allegory and dark satire Don't Look Up which he worked on with David Sirota, probably his most ambitious film to date. He also executive produced Succession on HBO and directed the show's premiere. In this, the darkest of dark times, we need voices like Adam's more than ever, and we are very glad to be speaking with him tonight.
The thing of it is we really did have everything, didn't we? I mean, when you think about it.
Anyway, before I introduce the panel, please like this video and subscribe to the Movie Night Extravaganza YouTube channel. Hit that bell to get notified whenever we're streaming. Also, we are now monetized, so if you have any pressing questions during this live stream, send us a super chat, which helps me keep the show running, and which I am obligated by international law, human rights law, to answer. We also have a Patreon, patreon.com/movie night extra. All of our after parties are on there forever. We also have a new Discord and a Letterboxd HQ account, so those are two more places to follow along with us. Links are in the description. Okay, let me introduce the panel. Conan Neutron, host of Protonic Reversal, co-host of Movie Night Extravaganza, and frontman for Conan Neutron and the Secret Friends, neutronfriends.bandcamp.com. Kristina Oakes is streaming on Twitch at Cosmopolitics, twitch.tv/Cosmopolitics. Also recently joined YouTube, she's on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Cosmopolitics. Send her some subs on Twitch, and send her a coffee. Kt Baldassaro is the co-host of Movie Night Extravaganza, a director, writer, and actress who wrote and co-directed Girl in the Basement, along with appearing in horror movies like The Purge Election Year and The Devil's Nightmare. You can catch her voice acting in the podcast series, The Starwell Foundation, and she's the host of What If I Don't Like It, and on TikTok at Movie Runtime. I, of course, am your host, Forrest Miller, and I will read anything you put on the teleprompter. Anything.
Yeah, is anyone else on this show? I don't think so. Yeah. Hey, hey, Adam, welcome. Yeah. Woo. There we go. That's all the time we have for it. It's been great having you, so thank you. Yes, I'm Conan. That's Forrest. That's KT. That's Kristina. Study up. There'll be a test later.
Just our names.
Just the names, though. That's the only thing on the test. So.
Yeah.
What a time to be alive, let alone be cognizant or an empathetic person or aware of politics, huh?
Woo! Yeah, it's here. We're in it. It's funny because I was telling someone the other day that it's been like 40 years of us being terrified of this moment, and it's here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was watching Don't Look Up the other day, like once again for like, the third or fourth time. Hard movie to watch in the best of times, just desperately bleak in the worst of times.
Yeah.
Same with Vice too, because we never thought that the Bush era criminals would be rehabilitated today.
That was kind of shocking to see Kamala Harris wholeheartedly embracing an endorsement from Dick Cheney. That really stunned me.
Yeah.
Make a sequel.
Yeah.
Even with half of the Project for a New American Century on MSNBC as contributors, that still seemed like a bridge too far to me. But
right?
Who
Yeah.
am I?
There was
I don't really understand the Liz Cheney thing. Like, kind of no one likes her. But I sort of get the theory behind it that, all right, we're doing a bridge for Republicans or whatever, that kind of nonsense. But, like, Dick Cheney empirically is one of the most hated political figures in the modern era. Like, Republicans hate Dick Cheney. And it was amazing. Like, I remember the first time Trump beat Hillary Clinton, the big debate was who was against the Iraq War, who wasn't. George W. Bush was terrible. Cheney was terrible. And very strange to see him trotted out as a golden endorsement.
That's like a prop almost. Like it was like the daughter was basically like puppeting him around to be like, look, my dad loves this. My dad loves Kamala. But we thought, we're gonna get to this when we talk about Vice. We thought we'd kind of go through your career, point by point. I know Katie has a couple questions about Upright Citizens Brigade.
Oh yeah, I mean,
yeah, we're taking it all the way back, Adam. Strap in, man.
I kind of have a couple questions about comedy theory with regards to that, because it's the perennial thing for people to want to take a shot at Saturday Night Live and say it stinks now. And lately, people are saying that it stinks because more of the cast members are coming from Upright Citizens Brigade than, say, Second City or Groundlings, and they believe that UCB has more of a game theory than where Groundlings and Second City had more of a character-based driven writing style. You were in both of them, so you have this unique perspective. Do you feel like that's true? Do you feel like one is ultimately better than the other?
Well, the trick with the Upright Citizens Brigade is it's no longer owned by the original founders. So they definitely hit a game theory really hard. And we would, in a very constructive way, argue about that. I was always the one who was like, bring more of the real world into it. Like, Viola Spolin was a socialist who created improv to be a workers' theater that could be done at lunchtime at the factory. That was the whole inspiration for it. So we always had a playful jousting where I was like, you should have members of the Socialist Party do the monologue.
Right.
And the way we founded it was with that spirit. It was always, we used Big Black, the old Steve Albini band. Was
friend of
our
mine.
Music. It was very political, very in your face, street theater. But as it went along, they did the show on Comedy Central, and I left to go to Second City because I was broke. And so, that's part of it. The heavy kind of game theory, like, get a result out of a scene before you've let the flaws and the kind of texture fully percolate. But I don't think that's what it is now. And I don't think, I haven't seen Saturday Night Live in a bunch of years. So
you're not missing much.
What's that?
You're not missing much.
I used to work there. I have friends there. It's a hard show. God bless them. But Second City definitely had more of an emphasis on character and being somewhat involved in the real world, although that was always a point of contention as well. But now they're under new ownership. They got bought by a private equity firm. And although I did hear the main stage cast this year really made an effort to get some subversive stuff in the show. So there's still a little fight back happening there. But yeah, we're living in grim times where every beloved kind of either group that I helped found or established institution is being sort of flogged at the altar of hockey sticks growth. So it's a tough time for comedy in this country because, comedy is the ultimate truth teller. You really can't fake it. So the idea of doing neoliberal comedy is a contradiction in terms. You end up doing a lot of stuff about relationships.
Yeah.
I have to adjust my career. The first real moment I remember seeing it start to rise, I was at Second City and everyone was talking about this new show, Friends. And I was like, what is this? And I watched it and I was like, oh God, we're in trouble. And the reason
I had the same reaction, by the way. But
Never saw an episode.
Me neither.
It's kind of creepy. And I don't mean that as an insult to the people that wrote it, performed it.
Yeah.
The reason it was creepy is they were so good and the writers were really good and they were able to get laughs on nothing. And, you know, the show shut out economic reality.
How did they pay for that apartment? How? Tell me how they did that. Thank you.
Rent control.
I just assumed all their parents were rich.
Right.
I assumed like two of the characters' dad was Jack Welch from GE. But that was the first time, and I went, uh-oh. And sure enough, for the next 10 years, everything was, you know, can't you make it more like Friends? Why do the people have to be poor? Why do, you know, whereas we had seen like, you know, huge shows before that, like Good Times and Roseanne, All in the Family, that were like beloved shows about, you know, the poor, working class. And it was amazing to watch network TV just say, no, we'd rather get low ratings than indulge with this idea that we live in an economic reality. But
isn't there the new Obama like end of the world movie? And the last scene, I didn't see it, but I've heard like the last scene is they're watching Friends as the world ends. It's like a perfect Obama.
Okay, I did see it, and it's not what you think it is. So,
all right.
like,
what's the movie? I don't know about it.
The character, it's not. It being by Obama is not the most salient point. It is for some people that decided prejudged it before they saw it, apparently. But it's the guy who made Mr. Robot. He's the one that directed that one, and I found it quite interesting. And that's not what we're talking about. But yeah, Friends does loom large in the plot for a character.
It's kind of a historical moment. It was the first time we shifted into kind of this. You know, I always compare it to like when you go to a casino, there's no clocks, there's no windows, they're pumping in oxygen.
Right.
You change your money over for chips. And Friends was kind of the first time I saw that start to happen in a big way.
So is that part of what made you go into film then and move away from TV?
You know, I think ultimately I was at Saturday Night Live and having a great time. I got to make short films, still wrote sketches, got some stuff on the air that I was kind of surprised. But Lorne was always kind of like that. He liked to cause trouble, but then he kind of didn't. Back then, I don't, you know, I haven't seen him in years. But yeah, once I got that film bug, when I did those short films, I was like, oh, this is what I want to do. And then Ferrell and I wrote a feature script that never got made about car salesmen in Anaheim. It was called August Blowout. And we had so much fun writing that. And it was all kind of having fun with sort of outsized egos, low stakes situation, but they think it's high stakes, you know, sort of sweaty, you know, golf club masculinity. And we were like, we have to do this again. So then we wrote Anchorman, and every single studio and financier said no to it.
So I have a question going towards Anchorman. Do you think it's harder to make that kind of like universally beloved PG-13 style comedies in a society that's kind of become polarized so much, like not just in terms of like politics, but we've become polarized in terms of culture and in terms of like what people find even funny, right? Like it's hard to figure out what a universal crowd of people at some point would find funny. And like there's I was watching Anchorman, there's the last the last moment where it's this Animal House type moment where Steve Carell's character, right, ends up being a member of the Bush administration, and it's like a great shot because he's mentally challenged, and it's like
he has a name for us. It's Brick.
Yeah, right. But it's hard to imagine like in the Trump era, right? Like even taking like a shot like that, all of a sudden it's no longer a beloved universal comedy in a way. Like every Trump person is, posting on social media. I mean, of course, like everybody knows your politics, but I'll say like, if someone else did that, right? Like Judd Apatow or something, everyone would be like, oh, look at this. Like it's another piece of liberal Hollywood calling us mentally challenged. It feels like we're living in such a polarized reality that like even that kind of awesome, like very funny 2004 to 2010 type studio comedy feels like it's harder to do at this point.
I don't know if I quite agree with that statement. I think what's happened is you've seen more and more mega corporations merge, and everything becomes about getting that quick spike in your shareholder value. And I've experienced this in one form or another for a lot of years, but I've never seen it on steroids like this. And what happens when that happens, where everything becomes about get your shareholders spike so you can get your bonus, cut labor, cut quality, you start to, it just patently doesn't work with creative endeavors. I mean, Hollywood has tried this a few times to commodify movies. And, the last kind of big famous example was Wagons Ho in the 60s, which was the giant bomb that led to the age of the auteur and Easy Rider and Scorsese, because old Hollywood, which was being run for like profit, so you only look backwards, you do what's worked in the past, completely collapsed and led to, I don't know, I would argue like the 15 greatest years of film in the entire history of cinema. And I think we're in that moment now. You're starting to see these Marvel movies underperform. People are kind of making fun of them. All of the old formulas that they're trying to repeat for their shareholders aren't working. Or there's a new element that's come into play, which is you have companies, that have huge retail operations, or, streamers that have advertising, and they don't want to bother their suppliers, their advertisers, their sales. So they shy away from everything. So it's a really tricky point right now. A year ago, I was talking to a friend of mine, and I was like, look for a massive indie film scene to emerge in about 2 or 3 years. The other prediction was look for live theater to become huge, especially with AI, which is kind of the new player in all of this. And you can't fake live music, live theater. And I'm not talking.
Boy, are they trying.
What's that?
I just said, boy, are they trying, but.
Yeah.
Well, and as someone who is a live musician who literally just got off tour, I'm there with you. Like, you can't AI like a band playing in front of you. You just can't do it. Maybe eventually they'll get the holograms and give it a go, but so far they haven't been able to steal that from us.
No,
but I think
Tupac's really shredding on guitar. Hologram Tupac, who knew?
But I think it's interesting, Adam, what you're talking about here, because also I think Anchorman, as hilarious of a movie as it is, for me, it's in the same canon of films as like broadcast news and like one of my favorites of all time, Network, which is to say this is substantive media critique of how news historically has and had been covered that has now changed. We were in different epochs of time, right? And I think it's done comedically in Anchorman, but like the whole the thing where like, reads anything that's put in front of him, literally. You know, how far, that's not that far from the truth, really. And then you get into whole like cable news world, et cetera, et cetera. But I think kids today, they don't even understand like what like local news is, because it's all gone. It's all owned by Sinclair or like these other broadcast mediums.
And about crime.
Well, yeah, I mean, because it's barely funded, if it's even there at all. And so I think it's it's sad that like a satire of it is a snapshot of the time, but it is almost a snapshot of the time at the same time. And it's changed so much. And I feel like it is weirdly like one of the bellwethers of where things were from a media standpoint that is just an anachronism now.
Yeah, it was probably a mistake to have the fourth estate of government be for profit. Like, I mean, when we did Anchorman 2, which was a really interesting experience, we had never done a sequel. We were curious, why do comedy sequels never work? I mean, we somewhat learned why they never worked, but there was also good stuff in that movie. But there was one section where Ron Burgundy says, don't cut away from this car chase. Let's go live. And we actually had to add voiceover because the audience had no idea that this wasn't normal up until the early 90s or OJ.
Yeah.
And when we added the voiceover, I could hear the audience go, oh. And we had some really interesting focus groups on that movie. I think the movie's 10 minutes too long. You know, it was tricky to balance calling back the old jokes with new jokes, whatever. It's not, it's not perfect. But there's a run in there where Burgundy discovers trash news.
Yeah.
It's about 20 minutes long that I think is as good as anything we've ever done. But the audience had no idea that the news used to actually be news.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But no frame of reference of any kind, which is almost more depressing than anything else.
Yeah. And also, too, of course, like the fight scene with every single different news outlet goes viral all the time. Yeah. And I'm just reminded of how hilarious, all these different, actors and actresses coming together to battle it out.
That's an all-time comedy highlight for me. Like, I mean, as much as I think the original movie is just fantastic on its own with the main plot, like that's like an all-timer sketch situation that ands into like the stratosphere, right? So, like, how did that sequence come about? Because it's pretty epic.
You're talking about the end of the Anchorman 2?
The first one. I guess both of them because it's referenced again in the second one. Yeah. But just the fact that like the news squads as gangs, more or less, right? Like that.
I gotta give Judd Apatow a lot of credit. Will and I had rewritten the script a bunch of times, and it was mostly what you ended up seeing in the final film, but obviously with the improv. And Judd just said, I feel like you guys can do one more crazy thing. And we were like, well, I don't know. I think it's pretty good. He goes, try it. And Ferrell and I got together and we're like, what if we create a gang fight? And we wrote that scene in like 45 minutes. And the funny thing is we shot the whole thing in one day when it was like 103 degrees in downtown LA.
Wow.
And it was crazy. I think we did something like 92 setups in one day.
Holy crap.
Medics everywhere because it was so hot and we were on this concrete. And there was a little part of us that was like, is this going to stay in the movie? It's pretty crazy. And then as soon as we cut it together, it was like, oh, not only is it going to stay, it's my favorite part. And then the decompress after the gang fight, which is something we, I think, entirely improvised, where like that escalated quickly. That was all improvised. Yeah.
Can I just tell you that escalated quickly was a quote used very often on the touring circuit around that time amongst rock bands anytime anything absurd happened. So thankfully.
I love that each one of the news teams escalates though, so that all of a sudden you have Tim Robbins, like
as NPR, amazing, yeah.
And like you get like a mental throwback to like Bob Roberts or something like that, or like that entire, and then you have like the Telemundo style like the Spanish language TV news guys
Canadians.
Each one of them feels like a full escalation of the last one.
I mean, that was the idea of calling it back in 2 was cable news.
Cable.
So you had 5 news channels in the first, or 4, and now of course we have like 38.
Yeah, it just keeps going and going and going, right? Yeah, and that's part of the gag.
If anything, we probably should have gone on even longer.
Right.
Like there should have been 7 more with decreasing celebrity.
What is it now? Like News Nation or wherever? Where?
One America News Network, Newsmax.
I call News Nation the Island of Misfit Pundits.
Yeah,
I call all that Roku News because that's the only place you can find those channels. But
it's everybody that gets fired from cable now has a news network, which is kind of amazing. Like if you get fired from cable news, now you have your own news network. I was
wait for NNN Neutron News Network coming soon. Thank you.
I was wondering if how much like your
Oh shoot! Whoops. That was me. That was me. Sorry.
I was wondering how much your opinion of kind of like news anchors informed the the Bree and Jack characters and Don't Look Up, because that's such a perfect version of like the like daytime TV, like daytime hosts that they keep it. They're like, oh, we're gonna keep it light, despite the fact that like they're being told that the world's about to end. There's still like this obsession with keeping it light, keeping it breezy. And I wondered how much like your media critique either evolved. I mean, it has to have evolved in crazy ways between Anchorman and that, but like it does feel like there's a straight line between those sets of characters.
Yeah, I went from our news media's kind of struggling, which was Anchorman, to with Don't Look Up, it was our news media's completely collapsed. So obviously that show with Jack and Bree is Morning Joe. And I had never seen Morning Joe, but I was like, sometimes I'll just do a tour through the news media to see what everyone's saying. And, the climate stuff has been getting really alarming and urgent in a way that, 5 years ago, I couldn't have imagined. And I watched that show and I was like, this is the dumbest show on all of television. This is dumber than reruns of F Troop. Like, if you were to watch reruns of F Troop, you would be more informed. And then during the Biden administration, I heard that that's the show he watches every morning.
That's his favorite show.
That's like his Fox and Friends.
Yeah, when Morning Joe was on
New York City, Manhattan news media world loves Morning Joe.
Yeah, it's like a bowl of gruel. It goes down easy, apparently.
But
what does it say? What does it say about that show that the president? I mean, we have 2 presidents in a row that watch that show every day, both suffering from cognitive decline, and that was the show that's where they got their news. Was that on TV?
Yeah, what does that tell you?
I'm not a logician, but if I were going to parse it out, it means that Morning Joe is the dumbest TV show in the history of broadcast, streaming, and cable TV. I defy, like, it is way dumber than like the old Glenn Beck show, because at least that show was tapping into kind of a working class confusion or older, like there was like one toe in reality. Morning Joe is like, I can't even, it's like something you'd put on in the background when my grandfather was alive to make him think that it's still 1948 or that feels insulting to 1948, but yeah. So,
in summary, big fan. Got it.
An intense, and mostly it was driven by fear, because the New York Times, Morning Joe, MSNBC were abjectly and still are ignoring just unbelievably dire climate news every single day. I mean, there's like, 20 studies about how broken mainstream news media is with covering climate. We've since gotten to see that they have no problem doing the same thing with ethnic cleansing in Gaza. They've always ignored money in politics. They ignore poverty, class inequality. So, my only regret with the movie is, and I don't know how we could have been more vicious, but I wish I had been 3 times more vicious.
There's a news story that broke this year where they had I think it was 10 months in a row in the end where it was the hottest month ever on record, and it was just month after month, and then finally there was I can't remember if it was July or August. I think it was September. We finally broke the streak, right? Like 1 month before we would have been the hottest complete year month by month on record, and it was at the same time.
It actually got up to 16 months in a row. And it wasn't just the hottest month since we kept records.
Yeah.
It was safely the hottest month. Each of those 16 months in 125,000 years, potentially 2 million years. You have to go to kind of proxy data like fossil records and all this, tree rings. But there was some scientists that were like, these are the hottest global temperatures recorded in 1 million to 2 million. I mean, you're going back to the Miocene era at that point, which is not a place we want to be.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. That's not Step Brothers.
We all live in the same world, my dude. It's all good.
I don't know. We like to keep it light on this show, God.
Yeah, we like to keep it light, exactly.
Well, that's kind of like, I'll segue that into Talladega Nights because I wanted to ask about
how. I don't know how, but I admire your pluck. Go ahead.
Watch me segue this. Boom. I am struck by how that movie is both a satire and kind of a celebration of the American people. And how do you make movies where you're trying to send a message to the American people, make them feel good, but also make them hear something? Like, how do you walk that line of being like, yay, America, but also, for fuck's sake, please listen?
I think of all the movies that Will and I did, that was the most successful in achieving that fine line. And I think what it came out of is we were really obviously upset by George W. Bush and Cheney, the invasion of Iraq. I mean, people nowadays do not understand how much Cheney dismantled the government. And it was really dispiriting. And then, we forget that it was almost 80% of the country was like, yes, let's invade Iraq. So I had like friends and family. And so Ferrell and I were mad. And we wrote that and we went to make it. And then, of course, you're meeting the real people. We're in North Carolina. We're meeting the NASCAR people. And that was kind of the first time where I started to understand that this idea of like half the country is ignorant and war hungry is just false. That it's actually 75% of the country are underpaid workers who are trying to pay their rent because we loved the NASCAR world. Like the people were so cool. You saw right away what they were into about it. And that really kind of influenced the movie, and it influenced how I edited with Brent White, my editor. And I was really happy with the way it turned out because in the end, really the big thing that Ricky Bobby learned was if you're not first, you're last is crazy talk. His dad was high when he said it. And strip your corporate sponsors off your car and drive for yourself and the people you love. And the other trick that I love that we pulled off right away, Ferrell and I were like, he can't win the race. And when we discovered that idea of the collision and he would run across the finish line and John C. Reilly's character would win, we were just tickled. It was like, and I heard a lot of stories from Deep South. People really loved it. And at the same time, we're able to laugh at Sacha Baron Cohen's character and kind of the stupid pride of it. That was kind of a perfect blend. We had that with Don't Look Up, where we had like Republicans, conservatives dug it, not all, of course, and lefties dug it. And like there was a weird crossover with that movie. The Big Short, too. Like everyone knows the banks are slitting their throats. And that had a crazy crossover where the Republican Johnny Isaacson, I think he's from Alabama, invited us to Washington, D.C. to screen the movie. And I think Johnny Isaacson's passed away, so I don't want to speak ill of the dead. But let's just say Mr. or Senator Isaacson never saw a donor check he had a problem with. So,
right.
It was pretty crazy. Sherrod Brown was there, who's actually a pretty cool guy. But those movies are the ones where it starts to get away from this stupid red-blue kind of thought trap that we're all shackled with.
Sure. I mean, I remember very well. It was like 2004 when they first coined the term NASCAR dads. That was they were really, we have to identify what these types of voters are. These are NASCAR dads. And they had a few other ones too that were equally inane and reductive. But, having that in there, it was like, oh yeah, NASCAR became like shorthand for a particular type of person who, whatever their politics were, they would be rooked every time by these conservatives that basically had them on the menu rather than eating dinner with them. But on a lighter note, when you were casting John C. Reilly, was that at all inspired or homaging Days of Thunder, which is also in?
No, it actually came out of our first read-through for Anchorman. We had John C. Reilly, who Will and I knew from other things, read the Champ Kine role. And he was so funny, but he had to go to a Scorsese movie. And I remember telling him,
Happy birthday.
I remember telling, he was like, I'm so sorry. I was like, John, it's
Scorsese movie. It's going to be okay.
We were incredibly lucky because we had the brilliant, hilarious Dave Koechner stepped in, who was great.
He's awesome.
But that's, we were like, Will and I were like, that dude is seriously funny. And with Talladega Nights, sure enough, could improvise. He does that tricky thing with broad comedy where he's able to still keep his feet on the earth, and it's very hard with broad comedy, like Napoleon Dynamite. I thought that character was an incredible example, or Edith Bunker from All in the Family, where it's a huge character, but the proportions are right. There's a heart beating, and right away I could tell like Reilly just had a gift for that.
Does it make it hard to work with him to like pick which scenes you're gonna pick? Because like I know there were so many bloopers in Step Brothers, and I can't imagine how you pick what stays in when that's stuff that got pulled out.
It's so hard. I mean, I to this day think the funniest scene we shot for Step Brothers was cut. And it was a scene, and I'll tell you the reason that it was cut. It was a scene with Rob Riggle, who was Adam Scott's right-hand man at the helicopter leasing company. And it was a scene where Rob Riggle, during the meeting, had a heart attack. but was too proud and kind of steroided up to admit it. And during the meeting with Adam Scott and Ferrell, actually dies for a second and then comes back. And it was all improvised, you know, me off to the side, kind of giving prompts, but Riggle, Ferrell, and oh my God, we had tears in our eyes. And we did the cut of the movie and we put it in, and we could not get it to work. And I realized, he's not a main character.
Yeah.
So give him the ball here in such a big way. The audience's focus was off. They were like, well, we know Adam Scott's character is kind of the a-hole. Ferrell's Ferrell. Riley's Riley. And it was just the jump to like, here's a whole Rob Riggle scene. Also, we were in the late second act, early third act, and it's hard in that time of the movie to do a sprawling bit.
Yeah.
At that time, audiences kind of want the story to click in. So I think it's a mixture of those two things. But that scene is on YouTube if anyone wants to watch it. Oh yeah. So good. I told Rob Riggle, I'm like, I'm sorry, man. One of the funniest scenes I have ever seen, you know. And he still has great moments in the movie, but
Well, just like there was that Anchorman that was like all like the stuff that wasn't used, right? Like that extra, I forget what it was called, but I was like, oh, this is like you got a whole other movie of this that you can do, you know?
I mean, that was the biggest treat when we finally got like the Hollywood cameras and the you know, the legit crews, was that like no one was improvising. And I'm like, well, why wouldn't you if you're on schedule?
Yeah.
And you're here and everyone's dressed up. Like, and with Anchorman is really when we, you know, discovered that. And from that point on, it was just like, let's go. Someone told me for Step Brothers, we shot well over 1 million feet of film, which is which I think is more than Apocalypse Now.
I was gonna say, what's up there, Coppola? Yeah.
You always know it's bad when like, and I love to shoot on real film. People have tried to convince me digital is better. I've just never seen it be as good. So you can always tell you've shot a lot of film when the Kodak guys show up with champagne, you know.
I'm a big fan of. We're actually covering it this month. The movie Strange Darling. They shot it all on film. Strange Darling, which Giovanni Ribisi, the actor, is actually the cinematographer for that. Ooh. And boy, did he do a fantastic job with it. It's a gorgeous looking movie. I happen to think it's one of the better movies of the year, personally. We'll see how the rest of the panel thinks. But yeah. There you go. There you go, Ribisi. Shout out to you.
It was,
and that's shot on film.
Yeah, well, very much so. Yeah, to the point that a bunch of people are like, "Why do they keep announcing that?" Because it's special now, is why.
Exactly.
That's why.
Exactly.
We had a big discussion with Succession, where I read that pilot script from Jesse Armstrong, and I was like, "This has to be film. You need to feel the." The kind of weight of it, and people subconsciously can always tell. I mean, there's a part of your mind that is clocking randomness versus simulated randomness, and we shot the whole series in film. I think there were like a couple of shots that were digital, but
Well, you heard of that one, Forrest? You heard of that show?
Yeah. I gotta watch.
It's like his favorite show. That's why I bring that
up. No, but there's something so like you definitely could tell, because we were just talking about like the Ty West horror movies earlier this week, and they kind of simulate the film part of it, and like that, the original movie X that he did, and you can tell it's simulated, and they do like kind of the fake 70s sort of like like grainy film thing, and it's like.
I hate it.
Yeah, and you feel it's like it feels very superficial, when you're looking at that versus actual shot on film, like you get like a almost like a vision into somebody's early life or something. A lot of times it feels like. But Conan, you had one more question about Talladega Nights, right?
Oh, I guess it's more of a comment than anything else. 400 Blows that's a friend's band of mine. Like, we toured a lot over the years, and I was completely over the moon when I saw their inclusion in the movie. And first of all, in a great scene, perfect for the music. And I think that there's a lot of people have music choices with movies, and a lot of times people go for things that are just more well-known because it's the easy get. But I think there's a really good balance of that kind of stuff in all your films, but especially that one because it has, because I personally know people in it.
Which song?
The 400 Blows. It's one of the racing scenes. It's a small.
Wait a minute. You know 400 Blows?
I've played like dozens of shows with them.
Come
Yes.
on. Come on.
And not just I know the movie too, but yeah, they're buddies.
Wow.
And it blew my mind to see it on like the big screen, basically.
I got a hold of that CD. I mean, I'm a huge music fan, and when I lived in Chicago, we would go see, Albini and all
Shellac and
cool,
stuff. Yeah.
Shellac. I saw them like 5 times, and all these really cool bands. But when I got 400 Blows, I was like, how have I never heard this sound before? Mm-hmm. And I had a friend who used to live here in LA, Matt Dwyer. And I'm like, dude, do you think we could get, and I kept telling my composer, can you do a sound like this? Doesn't have to be that, and he couldn't. And I was like, I'm using the track. And we tried to find out how to get in touch with them. It took a long time, but that band, man, they just
so good.
I've never heard. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, many shows played with those guys. And yeah, from the very first note of the first song I played, I was like, what is up with these dudes? This is like crazy. This is like very, even amongst like the world of noise rock or punk rock or whatever, very unique sensibility. And the fact to see it on a big screen on like what to me was a very big motion picture was really awesome. Like very cool.
To their credit, I mean, they had a really original sound that I couldn't find anywhere except with them. So I was so glad. I hope they still get the residual checks.
I hope so too. By the way, I'll send this to them and they'll get stoked about it for sure. Because I still talk to all 3 of those dudes. So.
Oh my God, that band was unbelievable.
That's right. That's right. Fellas, you know where to send the check. Send it over here.
So Kristina, you had questions about The Other Guys. You rewatched it last night.
Yes. The Other Guys is actually probably my favorite movie of yours, Adam, because it's a movie that my father and I, God rest his soul, watched all the time. And I have to ask, because I think this is the first collaboration that Will Ferrell and Mark Wahlberg had, because they had a really good dynamic duo. And fun fact, Mark Wahlberg actually has a place in my town. He comes here all the time, which is,
Wait, what's your town?
Aiken, South Carolina. It's right on the border, right before Augusta, Georgia. So a lot of people come to my town to stay for the Masters. But what I got from The Other Guys, and please elaborate, capitalism is the main villain of this movie, right?
Yeah.
And that someone tweeted about this. They're like, only Adam McKay can make like a buddy cop movie and have capitalism be the main villain. And I feel like sometimes it goes over people's heads because like the Ershron and all those, they represent the capitalism. They represent the corruption. And I just want to know, like, how did you come up with the idea of making capitalism be the villain in that movie? Because again, it's a comedy. People probably don't realize in the end what it's really about. It has a lot of heart and soul.
Great question, because we made that movie right around the time of the housing crisis. And people are always like, what do you care? You're a rich Hollywood guy, which is partially true. But like my dad lost his house, people forget, like I have friends I grew up with and family, and it was all so disgusting and transparent. So I wrote it with Chris Henshey, who's a producer, writer, and right away I said, we can't do drug dealers. We can't do the Jeopardy plot. being a bank robbery, because what just happened with the housing crisis is one of the great crimes in human history. You're literally talking about trillions of dollars. So we spent months and months crafting this elaborate story where the nerdy guy who looks at the paperwork, discovers the real crime, and Wahlberg keeps thinking people are drug smugglers, but he's an idiot, and Urshan doesn't really care because he knows he's in jeopardy, and they're blowing off their union like, oh, that's boring, but in the end they should have paid attention to their union because it's them. And we did all this work, and we put the movie out, and like no review saw it. Every single review was like, why did they run those end credits about the financial crisis? And let me be clear, no discredit to the critics. What I learned was that's too shrouded. Like, you have to, and it was a really interesting moment because, our kind of culture, really strange because I'm old enough that I've seen it change, has really become a culture of like the meaning of a film or the emotional impetus of the film has to be shrouded. Otherwise, it's cringe, it's too obvious.
Yeah.
And what you end up with, like, I'm a big fan of the Iranian filmmakers. They're so incredible. And if you look at all their movies, they're clearly trying to dodge, a ruling power that is not cool with them saying critical stuff. But in our country, theoretically, we don't have that. Like, you should be allowed to say things nakedly. But I think through a twisted combination of like people going to film school and kind of studying like Tarkovsky and the hidden symbolism, but like, no, like if you look at movies like A Face in the Crowd or It's a Wonderful Life, pretty naked what they were about. So that was really at that moment after the other guys, I was like, well, it worked because the movie made money, it got good reviews, blah, blah, blah. People laughed, but I was like, I kind of knew things were changing. We were going into a zone that was much more dangerous and tumultuous. And I was like, we can't do these comedies like this anymore. Although, as far as enjoyment and my personal life, I would have gladly done comedies like that for 35 more years. I mean, we laughed all day long. We improvised. We had good food. Like, I mean, The Other Guys was so fun to make. We were in New York City. I'll never forget, we had this driver who knew every good pizza joint, chicken party.
Yeah.
I put on like 25 pounds, like we were improvising all day. It was like the most fun. And then, I got this Michael Lewis book and you're like, all right, we're doing this. So yeah, I always go back to the Hannah Arendt quote, which is in a time of, repression, simply saying the truth is a revolutionary act.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Once you hit that, you know where it takes you? Right back to the punk rock movement.
Yep.
God save the Queen. She ain't no human being. He's not covering that up. I mean, and that song was so startling that they made it illegal in the UK. And, Conan, I'm sure you know the story that they came out with the charts and the number one song was literally blacked out.
Yeah, they wouldn't even print it.
And I saw it with Public Enemy, man. Public Enemy put people in uncomfortable. And that was kind of the moment where I was like, fuck it. Like, let's just, no one is talking about the Iraq war. I lived through that shit. I'm going to go into the belly of Dick Cheney's soul and blah, blah, blah.
And we will get to that for sure. I just do want to mention we did have Alex Cox on too, and we talked about Sid and Nancy, Repo Man, all that. That was a blast. That was great dude, great filmmaker.
Great filmmakers that people don't talk about near enough. Yeah.
I mean, they erased him from the map. Like he made Walker, and they kind
after
of
Walker, yeah.
I always thought it was Straight to Hell that got him into trouble. By the way.
Straight to Hell was the movie he made so he could make Walker, and the deeply radical act was taking the money that he made from that and going down to actually Nicaragua and then working with the Sandinistas to film that. Like that double feature, just they erased him off the map after that. It was one of those,
which of course is a very loose allegory for for some other stuff going on. I'm not sure if you're aware, but yeah.
Anyone who's not familiar with Alex Cox, oh my God! I was in high school when Repo Man came out. And, and back then, of course, we didn't have the internet. We had like zines, VHS tapes, and then live. And oh my God, when we saw Repo Man, my friends and I, we bought all those bands.
The soundtrack, one of the all-time great soundtracks, right? I kept harping on it when we did that episode, but like, I mean, it's true. It's like it's a lot of people's first forays into punk rock is like the Repo Man soundtrack, at least of a certain age.
The suicidal tendencies, institutionalized, gets thrown in there. And,
I always say that's the national anthem for doomers. For people that are freaked out, climate, COVID, Gaza.
All I wanted was a Pepsi, and she wouldn't give it to me. Speaking of music, Kristina, before we move off from the other guys, I know you had a thing you want to talk about the car chase scene, right? That was
yes. To me, The Other Guys has the best car chase scene in a film in history. Why did you pick my favorite song of all time, "Monday Monday" by the Mamas and the Papas, as the song for that chase?
You know, I gotta give credit where credit is due. I think it was John Woo who invented the game of horrible violence or action with contrary
beautiful music
songs. So Erica Weiss, my music editor, and I, it's so fun doing that. And we just spent a week trying like all kinds of different songs. By the way, the end of Talladega Nights was a big one when Ricky Bobby starts running to the finish line. We must have tried 80 songs for that. And I think it was my old assistant was like, what about this Pat Benatar song? And we're like, how is that perfect? So that was how Monday. It's also a great song.
Oh yeah, and a typical Alan song too. The pig. That's why Mark Wahlberg's like whatever. Yeah.
All right. So jumping to The Big Short. I wanted to know about like your process of kind of radicalization around this time, and I mean you started to talk about it, moving away from like the other guys realizing that this kind of went above everybody's heads because it was kind of in the middle of a comedy and everyone paid more attention to the comedy. I was wondering though, like, a little bit more if you wanted to talk about it. Your like radicalization around this time with, I mean, because you have not just the financial crash, you have Occupy Wall Street around this time. Like this is a moment of real flux. I mean, in the
which we covered this movie earlier this year, along with an entire month of movies about greed and avarice. So we did Wall Street, we did Glengarry Glen Ross, we did Wolf of Wall Street, Big Short, and Dumb Money. So we had to end with some degree of positivity. We're all going to commit suicide.
That really wasn't. I've always been pretty. I grew up on food stamps. Single mom. Like I grew up in the period where you could grow up poor and still like have an opportunity. And so like, we lived in these poor towns but it was always fine. We had food stamps. The public schools were good. We were the family the church would bring the gifts to on Christmas Eve day. Like you probably need this, but it never felt like that because there was that safety net. I ended up going to Temple University. when I left school, I dropped out my senior year to go do improvisation in Chicago. I owed $2,500. And, you know, I had waited tables through college. So I grew up in this. And my mom was always a little bit of an activist. She was the person that would get the petitions in the neighborhood. So, you know, through Second City, Upright Citizens Brigade, like, you know, I played Noam Chomsky in a scene at Second City.
Nice.
So Upright Citizens Brigade, we would take the audience back to my apartment. There was always kind of political, you know, punk rock kind of overtones. We had a member get arrested one time because we took the whole audience into the street and we were going to go get the head of Dan Rostenkowski, who was a famously corrupt Chicago congressman. And so everyone had tiki torches before they began. You know,
it's the Tiki Torches' first album before they sold out.
And we had plastic guns, which nowadays that would have been very dangerous. And Horatio Sands, who was in Upright Citizens Brigade, got arrested. We had to raise bail money. You know, even at SNL, a bunch of I remember writing a cold open about Al Gore and George Bush. Who can tell the difference? Because Gore was leaning hard right, Bush was leaning left. So it's always been part of what I've done. But that moment that that the other guys came out, I realized kind of things have changed. Like, we're in a different world. All the stuff that I was sort of playfully warning about is happening. And we're in real trouble. So my kind of level of alarm went up. And then when I read The Big Short, I was like, this is perfect, you know.
And I actually read it earlier this year for the first, because I've seen the movie probably like 4 or 5 times, but I actually read the book this year when we covered it on an episode. So I was like, you know what? I actually haven't read this. And it was right around the time that Michael Lewis had written his kind of fawning SPF book that was kind of going through the news too. And it was like, oh man, but I think he did a good job with The Big Short as a book.
A bunch of really good books. I didn't read the one about the crypto guy, but Lewis gets the scam that's going on.
Well, he's an ex Wall Street guy himself, right? Like that was one of his big things. He like tried it for a few years and then was like, oh no, this is something that's actually kind of falling apart. That like there's every single part of this is hollow behind it, and that was his kind of career.
Yeah, he wrote a book, Liar's Poker, and it was like a dark, stark warning. And it ended up leading to thousands of more people going to Wall Street. It's kind of like Wolf of Wall Street, you know, where, oh, look how
which also we covered that month.
Yeah. And then you watch the movie and you're like, kind of looks like fun. You know?
Yeah. Right. That was my point. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like no, come on, it looks like it's a good time.
I mean, both movies have Margot Robbie in it, so that was always
Anchorman when it came out. I mean, clearly the movie's joking about fluff news and sexism.
Yeah.
And then we saw these kind of like raging frat guys into Anchorman, and we were like, oh,
you're missing the point
for that. Yeah. So it's always tricky with that, but yeah.
KT has something pretty cool I want to get to, but since we're talking about the narrative and the story, I do want to say that I think the interweaving 3 narratives on that are pretty deftly handled. Some might even say award-winning. So how hard was it to put all together, like, as a cohesive narrative?
You know, that was another interesting thing at that point where, you know, I went to college. I, you know, studied film, took the screenwriting classes. I was very familiar with Sid Field, who was a huge help with my first 2 or 3 screenplays. But about the time after the other guys, I was like, I don't think this storytelling framework is going to cut it. I think we've gotten so comfortable with it. I think it's become like a 3-chord rock song where you know what's coming. So the idea was to really, honestly, with all 3 movies after that, with The Big Short, Vice, and Don't Look Up, was to disrupt that sort of comfortable storytelling narrative, because we're in times where, comfortable engagement or entertainment has been weaponized. And so, with The Big Short, that was one of those weird moments where I was like, no, I know exactly how to do this, interweave the 3 narratives, which, by the way, is basically what Michael Lewis did with the book.
Yeah,
in the book,
but
right.
The bigger thing was to just break the fourth wall, read the audience's sense of, oh, this is boring, call it out and be like, it's boring for a reason. And when we got that dialed in, we literally dialed it into the exact moment where the audience was like, what are they talking about? And then we
right.
And the whole movie lit up and everyone went, I'm not stupid, which is what, our ruling elites, news media, financial world is constantly telling 80% of the people in this country, you're stupid. That's why you're not here. And it is bullshit.
Here's your swap, little piggies.
And then you get like, once you kind of start paying attention, like your eyes are open, you realize how wrong the economists are. The so-called economists that, like, over and over again, you're told these are the people smarter than you. These are the experts. These are the people who know what's going on. You're like, oh no, a lot of these people are dumber than probably the people paying attention that actually can see their bank account and know what's going on in the world, like based on that. I was.
Well, hold on, right? Let's KT. That's kind of hitting some of the points you wanted to get on.
Oh,
right?
No. Yeah. That was basically my point was, as someone who also is writing screenplays, the breaking of the fourth wall in that movie was so deftly done and so desperately needed. And how did you know how to do that? How did you know how to do it so many times without doing it too many times? It feels like a razor's edge.
It comes pretty directly from theater, because I started in Chicago and there was this whole Paul Sills story theater thing where you would narrate stories, play with point of view. And then the second part of that was so good. A movie I saw a long time ago called 24-Hour Party People.
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah.
When I saw it, I was with my wife and I was like, I think I literally made a sound when we were watching it, like, oh, that reminded me of story theater, that reminded me. And then just in the back of my mind, it was like, oh yeah, you can do that. So I'm having a brain fart. I'm forgetting the director, but
Winterbottom, Michael Winterbottom.
Yes, Winterbottom. I had an email exchange with him and I was like, dude, I'll tell people, nakedly, that movie totally inspired me, totally reminded me you can do this. There are no rules, because one of the things with when you really start to corporatize any creative act is lots of rules, because the boardroom likes rules. And it's just, that's why one of my all-time favorite movies is Kung Fu Hustle, because
right.
He obeys no rules. Like, it is pure imagination. And I think it's important with filmmaking, music, acting, theater, whatever it is, painting. Like, there are no rules, man. You're in free land. As shitty as your job may be, as crappy as your town,
I think about that every time I make a record. And if you're not, what are you even doing? KT, I know you think about that when you're making films. It's otherwise, like, what are you doing? McDonald's? Like, here's your burger and fries. Like, what are you even doing here?
The only reason to learn like the rules when it comes to filmmaking and stuff, I feel like, is to break them. Like the only thing that,
Here's why this works.
Like the Sid Field book, that was like training wheels. You kind of, it's pretty simple. It's basically a rise and fall, which makes sense. So, oh my God, I got a lot out of that. And absolutely, you don't want to start free form. You kind of want your earliest phase to be, learning the basics, kind of getting into it. But, I've seen people never let go of those rules.
Right. And they stayed with it for forever. And I love Fellini. I love the weird surreal stuff, but like Nights of Cabiria might be my favorite one of his. And it's like, that's
my favorite.
Oh my God. All right. We should hang out.
Hey, come back to discuss it.
Yeah. Oh, shit. We haven't covered it. You're right. Yeah.
2 times I was sobbing at the end of a movie.
Oh,
Nights of Cabiria,
brutal.
Smiles, Juliet Messina smiles. And the second one, of course, is Breaking the Waves, the end. It was just like, I remember my wife looking at me like, "Are you okay?" Like,
yeah. That's a perfect example of someone that that like Fellini, 8.5. What is 8.5? Like a director's nightmare slash a. It's something different at 45 than 25 than 35. Yes, all of these things can be true. Like would we have half of what David Lynch does without it? Probably not.
I love David Lynch. He was probably the big one when I was in high school.
Hell yeah!
When I saw Blue Velvet. That was like one of the most, head-changing moments. Talk about, you can do that? Like,
yeah.
The best.
Yeah.
There's like a surrealism to everything too in every David Lynch movie that you lose the plot kind of in some kind of dream, and it's like the entire time kind of you're watching it, you're like, I don't know how much of this is dream and how much of this is reality, but if like the filmmaker's talented enough, they can kind of draw you into that.
And now Dennis Hopper from that movie is president. Thank you.
The trick with Lynch that I always say, the big secret with Lynch, he's funny as shit. And most of his movies are like 50% a comedy. Like Lost Highway is so funny. Wild at Heart is so funny. And Lynch is like seriously a funny guy. So yeah.
And there's always that undercurrent of darkness underneath the suburbia too, right? It's so cool.
Any better way to laugh than with an undercurrent of darkness? Yeah.
That's my thing.
So moving forward to Vice, right? Conan had a really good way of putting out the rehabilitation.
Yeah. So how horrifically awful was it to see the Cheneys not only be rehabilitated, but to see Dick Cheney's endorsement of Kamala as some kind of resistance feather in the cap? Because as I recall, the whole idea for Vice in the first place was to basically not #never forget. Let's not forget what this jerk did. And screwed an entire generation, killed hundreds of thousands of people, et cetera, and not have it be forgotten, not have it be whitewashed. So to have him be like, "Oh no, he's on the resistance now. We like Dick Cheney." How did that feel?
Yeah, I mean, after The Big Short, we were at this moment where it was like, wow, we really have some options. And having lived through Cheney Bush and having been in marches, fighting it every step of the way, I think if you're younger, it's hard to imagine how horrific, with that torture program and the CIA guy who whistleblows, he goes to jail, but no one else does. And there are estimates that there are 1 million direct deaths from that invasion, and possibly 2 to 3 million indirect deaths. So it was, my theory on that was always that's when America really gave it away. And we had that one little moment where if Obama had been for real, maybe we could have brought it back, but then he turned out to be a total
He's a company man.
Yeah. But yeah, that movie was very personal. I remember talking to a good friend, and we were talking about I don't really hate people. And we were both kind of laughing, and I was like, except Dick Cheney. And my friend
agreed. Yeah.
My friend right away went, "You got to make that movie." And when I saw what Christian Bale.
Oh,
yeah. He should have gotten the Oscar.
Well, you know, he would have if he hadn't said during the Golden Globes, he said, "Thank you, Satan," to Cheney. That was a little, you know.
That might have been the first red flag that
he made it political. Yeah.
How dare he? Love Christian Bale.
Nothing like everyone hates that guy except for corporations, billionaires, money to leave.
Yeah.
So, that was one of that's the hardest project I've ever worked on. He is so secretive, Cheney. His entire 500, 600-page autobiography, useless. He took all the documents with him out of the White House. So we actually had a journalist conduct interviews for us. I read every book, article. Each one would have a little kind of window, but there was no real comprehensive thing. And then at one point I discovered the latchkey to Cheney and what he's about. And it was that he actually sincerely is a great father, loves his daughter, his daughters. When his one daughter, Mary, came out of the closet, accepted her immediately, crazy about his wife, cooks dinner, does the dishes, like an amazing father. But in the end, he threw over his one daughter so the other daughter could run for this ridiculous Senate campaign. And I haven't heard an update, but when the movie was coming out, I was being told that the two daughters still weren't speaking. The family was fractured. So when I that was the one thing, because Cheney is cold, steely, but I was like, I know. And then I heard a story a month after the movie came out. A friend of Christian Bale's was at a party. I think the friend worked for like CNN, and Cheney was there. And the friend went up to Cheney and said, "Hey, you know, I'm friends with Christian Bale." I think kind of naively, like, you know, it's a big movie about you.
Yeah.
And Cheney turned to him and he said, "You tell that guy he's a dick." And the guy laughed, like, "Oh, you're being funny."
Yeah.
I'm serious. And I was like, when I heard that story, I was like, we got him. Like,
got his ass. Yeah.
Well, that's another thing. You speak about the daughters, like, you know, with all, you know, the embracing of Liz Cheney. I'm like, you know, guys, this is the same woman who believed like not even a year ago that abortions were a thing, and she hates her sister who happens to be a lesbian.
Well, she celebrated, right? She celebrated when Roe v. Wade got overturned. Like the Liz Cheney was still, you know.
The Cheney family has no moral compass. It's all about power. That was when I knew, like, I mean, I would say the one change that has happened, rather than me becoming radicalized, because I've always been a believer in, you know, all the. I've always considered myself a democratic socialist.
Same.
The one change was that I started to see, you know, when Biden was running, when Hillary versus Bernie, there was a darkness to whatever you want to call them, liberals, centrists, the professional class, white liberals. It started to become really scary. And there's scapegoating of the left, and the left has like no institutional power.
None.
You know, that's a hallmark of murderous right-wing regimes. And people I knew started to get weird. And it really, I think it's just the lesser of two evils. You can't dance that dance 40, 45 years without just giving away everything. And now it's to the point where it's like they're a noxious right-wing force, like in some ways more scary than the MAGA crowd. In fact, in a lot of ways, because they're colder. You know, I think it was Rudolf Steiner, who's a problematic guy, but he wrote about the two kinds of evil. there's luciferic evil, where it's flesh, blood, lust, greed. And then there's Ahrimanic evil, which is cold and detached from humanity. And I would say the, establishment Democrats, liberals are like Hillary Clinton and Biden, much more frightening in that Ahrimanic way, as opposed to kind of they're both terrifying. Don't get me wrong. So yeah, during Vice is when I really started to see it, where I was like, because, we chose to end that movie in an operatic way rather than a clever kind of, we're like, no, he literally ripped the heart out of the country. And and I was amazed by the conversations I had where they were downplaying it, weren't really aware. It was a scary time. So I wasn't entirely surprised by embracing Liz Cheney. I was shocked by Dick Cheney. And that's when I knew the Democratic Party was utterly worthless and needs to be abandoned.
With that endorsement, I heard from people that really ought to know better. But I heard from people that were like, assumed that was signaling like, oh, good, it's time for more foreign wars. And I'm like, okay, I really want to debate you on this, but I find it very, very hard to get up anything to like really say against that, because it is a bad look at best.
Yeah. Or back to normalization for the Republican Party. I'm like, it's never going to go back to normal.
That's what they think, right? Anybody that's against Trump is, oh, you're on our side. No. There is such a thing as a temporary alliance, sure, but that doesn't mean like you believe in any of the same things. You're just against the same person.
Yeah. Well, I saw that trend as soon as like Trump won. There were people that were in like the Kamala camp that were saying, "Oh, well, now that like Latinos have voted for Trump, we need to start calling ICE on the families of Latinos that voted for Trump. If you know one in your neighborhood, call ICE and get their family, like their undocumented family members, supported." And that was truly for me, that was like I guess your heart sinking out of the bottom of your chest moment. Where it's like,
and throwing transgender people under the bus.
Yeah. So I on the same track, I guess. I kind of had
on the same depressing track.
The framing of this, writing it down, was kind of silly, but like I was wondering, like, since you kind of tried to psychologize, I guess, some of Dick Cheney's thing, was the problem that he had with Trump, do you think, just that he's not the one that gets to do, because Project 2025, right? Like everyone was talking about that as like the unitary executive theory being used to do pretty much broadly whatever Trump wants this term, and like that's really what that whole document came down to. And I was wondering, like, is the problem kind of with Trump that he's doing it and not Dick Cheney, or not, Dick Cheney's group of neocons? Or do you think it really goes to the whole, like, running against Jeb Bush, running against the Iraq war kind of Republicans who claim at least to tear down that, like the Bush administration doctrine? Or like, because it seems like that Cheney and Donald Trump believe the same exact things, to the point where it's the same think tanks talking about putting their plans into effect.
I don't know. I'm curious, because I don't think there's any doubt that Trump is more of an outsider right winger than Cheney, who is like forged by the establishment, like Nixon.
Yeah.
Like he is sharpened against that stone over decades. And I think the Cheneys because when Lynn Cheney stepped out against Trump, that's not a moral decision. That's not someone saying, I care about democracy. That's a poker play. That's, I'm going to win this pot. And one thing I could say about the Cheneys, they lack any kind of imagination. Because if you were paying attention to Trump at that point, you realize, even though he's a wart on the, goat's cloven hoof of the devil, he still harnesses a lot of legitimate working class anger, and the Cheneys just have no idea about that. It's an abstract concept.
Right.
So she made a terrible bet. Her dad made a terrible bet, and Trump turned against him. I do think Trump is more of a isolationist than the neocons. but only because, not because Trump operates from any kind of ideology, but simply because he's always looking for payoffs. Like, is he really going to attack Iran when his daddy figure is Putin? Who, like, is he really going to keep giving money to Israel for arms? He might, because the defense contractors might buy him off. So with him, you always just have to look at who strokes his ego, who pays him. And there's no, which, by the way, was my theory with Dick Cheney in Vice. I put that moment in where young Cheney says, "What do we believe?" And Rumsfeld laughs. And that was because I read everything about Cheney. I never saw the slightest flicker of ideology other than we need a king. And the reason he wanted a king was so he could be the right end. You know, he could
that was kind of the thought, I guess, I was like, it's that same like, it's not that it's the exact same people, I guess, in Trump's thing, but the same kind of ideological motivation of like using the unitary executive theory, which is what they wrote out the Project 2025 thing to make,
which existed like 25 years before that. But yeah, of course.
No, I mean it's been since like.
Sorry to pull the age card for us, but it did exist before Project 2025.
No, what I'm saying is that Cheney's thing was the unitary executive theory because of, I mean, and it's chronicled perfectly in Vice with Scalia, where he's talking to Scalia, who was one of the formulative people. And it's almost like Trump is going to see the actual, I mean, Trump possibly could see the actual fruition of the unitary executive.
I think he already has.
Yeah.
I think he's got that SCOTUS immunity ruling, the SCOTUS Chevron. Did he win by 5 percentage points? Like, he won the popular vote. Like, this isn't like a
California is still not all in, of course. I do need to point that out because it's going to cut into that lead considerably. But yes,
okay, California dreamer.
Yeah, that unitary executive. When I started reading what he and his lawyer had written about that, it was like I got chills because it's some of the craziest stuff you have ever read. It's just dark, sort of like, you know, Sauron, kind of like Darth Vader kind of shit.
But like for someone like Dick Cheney, right, like the most bureaucratic kind of functionary, like deeply evil, but also in this like deeply bureaucratic kind of way. You see somebody like Trump reaching the fruition of it as like a outsider, like this incredibly gauche figure. It's almost like I remember when Trump came out and said, "Oh, I actually won the 2020 election." Dick Cheney ran ads against him or whatever for his daughter. It was like when Trump said, and it's like, yeah, because he's going around saying that he like won an election the same way that you guys stole an election in 2000. Like he's doing it but fucking it up. You know what I mean? Like,
you know, it's actually a great question. Does Cheney care about propriety or tradition?
Right.
That's a really good question. I don't think he would, because Cheney, in his essence, is a servant. He's the right-hand man to power. And even when he took the throne with George W. Bush, he's really representing his wife. I mean, his wife is very smart, very ambitious, grew up in a time where women were not allowed to run for office. Right. A lot of it was her. Would he care about propriety? I don't think so. Because if you look at several quotes from him, you know, hey, Iraq, all these people died. There were no weapons of mass destruction. So, you know, that's
well, I think it's less propriety and more like a very gauche version of what Bush and Cheney kind of tried to do, right? Like Trump taking it out there and saying, "Oh, I actually won." You know, like Cheney actually still managed to steal an election, right? Like it's like watching the most gauche person you know kind of go out and claim to be doing the kind of things that you did low key. Like it's that he's not keeping it as like an underhand thing or a card in the deck.
I totally agree. I've always said the analogy I use is like an expert safe cracker goes into a jewelry store, you know, spends hours opening up the safe, steals all the jewels, leaves and leaves the door open. And then the next day, like a dog walks into the store and takes a crap. And that's Trump. And we've all walked in and we're like, that dog! Like,
can you believe this dog? It's crapping everywhere.
I've walked in before, literally on Twitter with him. Not fun.
Well, but yeah, and this is a larger conversation, of course, but it comes from like 30 plus years of frame-based reality, right? Start with like Rush Limbaugh and The Trusted Source, and then you get into the Lakoff stuff and like Fox News, and had that, like, you know, it feels good to do certain things and frames instead of facts. And then you have the Democrats that work at the same playbook from 1989, refusing to update in any way, shape, or form, and doing every election like it's a persuasion election, except for this case, the only people they're trying to persuade are characters from Aaron Sorkin shows who don't actually exist in the real world, just like the completely constituentless Liz Cheney, who has no people whatsoever behind her and convinced literally nobody. And in fact, Republican crossovers went down this election after they paraded around.
Still giving them too much credit. It's bad faith. They get tons of money. The consultants, the kids get jobs. Democrats don't even merit criticism.
By the way, this is what I sounded like when we covered Vice, the entire show. I felt like my blood pressure. Christine knows about it.
I was like, whoa, gotta pull my earbud back a little bit.
sorry, not sorry. But,
you know, just I guess de-escalating a tiny bit. I have a question about Vice. So rewatching
that movie.
Rewatching it today, I was thinking about like the technique of kind of using the heart transplant donor as a storytelling frame. And I was wondering how you came up with that, because it's truly brilliant. And I remember watching it when it first came out, and when he gets hit by the car and you realize like who he is, it was such like a oh fuck like kind of moment, right? Because in the beginning he hints it, and it's like I still didn't necessarily see that coming. So I was wondering like how you came up with that storytelling technique, because it truly is brilliant.
So the original idea was that we had 3 narrators. We had like a Fox News anchor, Cheney's original girlfriend that he dumped for his wife, for Lynn Cheney, and the heart transplant. And I thought it would be cool to weave them, like you'd have a voice from The Simple Childhood in Casper, where all the emotional seeds were sown. You'd have the voice of the heart guy, but we wouldn't know he's America. And then the Fox News narrator would be opportunism and manipulation. But, you know, sometimes you think of things in your head and then you do them, and they're way complicated and messy. So after 2 attempts of making that work, I was like, it's the guy who had gave his heart.
Yeah.
And then
So we
once we tiled into that, we realized there was a lot of room to show his family, where he's working. And once again, my operating theory was always that this dude is really the guy who shot the bullet into America. Like, you know, I mean, Clinton was terrible. Reagan was terrible, but like, Bush Sr. even said it. Bush Sr. even said, like, I think my son would have been fine if he didn't have, old iron ass Dick Cheney. And that was his exact words. And Cheney just ran that. George W. Bush is like a 14-year-old. He has no.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
No clue. Like, I don't even think he's good or bad. He's just a kind of guy who uses his family name to like front shady projects. But yeah, Cheney worked him. So it was crazy to make that whole movie and then to see Kamala Harris and liberals embrace.
Yeah, it's like that
wild experience.
When they do that like tweet or whatever, where it's like screaming in your head, and it's like like.
Which kind of ties into my question about Vice. You got some criticism for not going too hard on the Democratic Party for also being complicit and agreeing to a lot of the Bush administration's, the war in Iraq and all that happened. And also ties into Don't Look Up, because it seemed like in Don't Look Up, you went completely like, yeah, I'm going to criticize everyone, liberal media, Democrats, and all that. Did you learn from that criticism from Vice to apply to Don't Look Up, or when you were writing the script?
So originally, I have like 3 regrets with Vice. And I really regret that when I tell the story of the Koch brothers and the Coors finally bringing money to Washington, D.C., you know, it's the Powell memo and all that kind of stuff. I originally had in the script how it carried over to the Democrats, and I had Bill Clinton deregulating Wall Street, the media, you know, enforcing, creating these draconian drug laws that encourage. And the narrator was like, and even when the Democrats came in with all that money around, they started looking a lot like Republicans. And, you know, the movie was long.
Right, yeah.
But it was
and
good.
We did hit the media, certainly with the Iraq War, and we showed Hillary Clinton supporting the Iraq War. But, yeah, that was a regret. So with Don't Look Up, we entered it like, also by that time I knew, because I had done work on climate, I knew the dirty secret of climate is that it's not the deniers that are the problem. That's only 11, 12, 13%. It's the middle 60% that say they believe in it but don't believe it's urgent. And a lot of those people are Democrats. And, you know, through the years, I've spoken to a lot of Democrats, senators, congresspeople, and it started to creep up on me like they don't care, they don't know, and they don't want to know. And then, you know, the horrors of Gaza hit, and then it was like, oh yeah, like we're in full corruption, full denial.
Right. Well, your father and I are for the jobs the comet will provide. So, you know.
My favorite, well, not my favorite line. My favorite line is Leo's line. We really did have everything.
Oh, yes. That's.
But my second favorite line is your father.
Thank God. I lost it completely when I saw that.
It was funny too, because I have an older sister who's a huge like Leonardo DiCaprio fan, so she sees any film he's been in. I'm like, yeah, we're gonna have the director of Don't Look Up on. She's like, Leonardo DiCaprio was in that movie. I'm like, yeah.
Now she cares.
I'm like also too. I'm like Ryan Gosling, Brad Pitt. I'm like, he's directed so many phenomenal actors that you and I both love. So I'm like, yeah.
So on that and on Don't Look Up, and I know KT has some stuff on this that I really wanted to get to, but I think that the fact that it more or less started from a tweet from Sirota, right, and one of the more evocative lines since "baby shoes for sale, never worn," if you ask me. So it's a very multi-layered story. Like, what was the process with that, and basically generating a multi-layered story with such a simple and sadly understandable concept.
Yeah, so during Vice, when we were doing all the research and reading everything, I saw that Cheney had really kind of slit the throat of climate action. And they had that woman, what's her name? The old governor of New Jersey was head of the EPA.
Kristy Whitman.
Kristy Todd Whitman. And, you know, she's not great, but she knew the climate was a problem, and kind of goofy adolescent George W. Bush knew the climate was a problem, and they were going to do some stuff, and Cheney killed it. So, you know, we were learning about that. But once again, it's one movie. How much can you put in there? And it was after that I kept reading about the climate that I started seeing these scientific reports, and then I'm a deep, you know, I love to go deep into stuff, whatever it is. And I started talking to scientists, and I was like, holy shit, this is 1,000 times. I was more in the camp of like, I saw the Al Gore movie. I know our government's corrupt. We probably need to be moving faster, but it's more of a thing for like, you know, 2060, which is still terrible. But when I learned it was now, I was like, holy shit. So immediately I just started like, my next movie has to be that, whatever it is. And I I'm a big fan of like write until it feels right. So I wrote like 4 premises for climate movies, and one was very dramatic. One was kind of a triptych. Another one was sort of a like, dystopic kind of. Anyway, so I tried all these ideas. I was like, it didn't feel right. And I'm like, what's wrong with this? And then Sirota just made an offhanded joke about, the comet's going to hit the Earth and no one cares. And I was like, that's it. And he's like, what are you talking about? And we went to email and I was like, that's it. It has to be a comedy. Because if you go into this with the really grim science, you're going to lose 70% of the people. Also, comedy, once again, is a, truth detector. It's a lie detector. And we got to do it as a world movie. So we got to do it on Netflix. That was the second thought. And, so it happened with The Big Short, happened with where right away you can see the whole movie. I was like, I know what this is. And I think I wrote that script faster than any script I've written. I think I wrote it in like 6 weeks. Just
Wow.
Mark
there's a sequence that I feel like hits this so hard in it, where they're in the room with President Orlean and they're all going back and forth, and then she says, oh well, I can't be 100%, and then I think the other scientist, the writer, says, well, it's 99.97%, and she's like, oh great, not 100. So she goes, can we say 70%? And then they're like, that's nothing close to 100%, right? Like that's a completely different like universe than 100%, and it kind of hits so like the way that science can be easily manipulated, because scientists don't want to go on record saying anything is 100%, and because scientists like that part of it, even kind of like the satire of that moment is like,
it's tentative truth versus absolute truth, and any physicist will tell you there's no such thing as absolute truth.
Yeah. It definitely
anyway, that movie shot right out of stark terror. I had like 3 or 4 nights I could not sleep, and I kept looking for someone to tell me like, yeah, it's bad, and I never found it. And I was talking to like NASA scientists. I was talking to like everyone. I was reading everything. I was just like, I gotta understand. And to this day, the only response I've ever gotten is, it is so much worse than people know. We scientists don't know what else to say,
No. It really reminds me a lot of the way that horror is right now, with like, it feels like a body horror story, kind of like there's an inevitable end to every body horror story. Everyone dies, your body goes down. There's no happy climate change story, but you're starting to see, because of Don't Look Up, genre films are getting into, let's make a horror movie that's about the climate change, that's satirical, because people can take it with a little comedy, or maybe a little comedy horror. And I know that the director of Under Paris said that Don't Look Up was a huge influence to him in making his
that's
film.
cool. Wow.
And I love that they basically just took direct quotes from politicians in France at the time to write parts of their script.
Wow.
How do you feel about knowing that like you're inspiring a whole genre, like a weird genre of political, ecological films?
That is so cool. I mean, the number one reason that it was hard to get that film made was because of the ending. And, our goal was always Netflix, but you try every studio, and there's a few others that are big studios that you're like, all right, if we did it here, it would be a world movie. And they were all like, with this ending, we won't do it. And Netflix was very afraid. And I just kept saying it's going to work. Audiences are dying for this. And the first screening, the audience went crazy. In the focus group, they're like, that's my favorite part. And then friends of mine would see it and they're like, I can't believe you did it, And it was a wild experience. And that's what I started cluing into the idea that, people have been getting bullshitted so long with ad pitches and garbage and formulaic movies. We're all just starved for the real world to be in our music, our stories, and our dance, or whatever you want to say. So it was like one of the more inspiring reactions I've ever had to a movie. When that movie went worldwide, and I saw it was like #1 in Nigeria, like Kuwait, Vietnam, and then I saw these languages on the social media, and then Netflix was like, we have never seen it. It was like 11-1 positive, and then later they did numbers digs on did it influence people on climate. I was like, it'll probably influence them a little bit, and they're like, nope, a lot. Like, and then the final kind of moment was when I heard there were nationwide protests in France that were the Just Look Up protests. I was like, I remember getting a little teary-eyed. I mean, it was really beautiful experience.
By the way, big in Kuwait for movies is big in Japan for bands. So there you go.
I realize my new life goal is anything I make has to be #1 in Kuwait.
#1 in Kuwait. Yeah, absolutely.
List off also the places that are going to be most affected by, like, because they already are like that hot. You know what I mean? It's like the places that climate change is going to just ramsack through.
I mean, part of it clearly is Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yeah, that's
still.
Well, that too.
I mean,
sure.
the response
behind me right now.
The metrics we saw.
It's right behind him.
Crazy positive. But like, I don't know if you guys have seen, there's like tons of flooding going on in Saudi Arabia, Jordan. Like, I always wonder, like, does the family of Saud, does MBS ever have a moment? Like, the science is so simple. Like, I don't know.
But see, that's the thing with like the addition of like religious fundamentalist ideology in government, both here and somewhere like Saudi Arabia. It's like, or do they just say, "Oh, don't worry, like God will protect us"? You know what I mean? Like, it's become such a bleak moment.
That all holds up nicely until your house is gone.
Like, completely. Yeah, no, I agree.
I don't know if you saw what happened in Valencia, but those storms were just beyond biblical. They got like a year's worth of rain in like 4 hours, and the King of Spain showed up, and the crowd threw mud balls at him, and they had it, and you saw it in North Carolina with Asheville and Appalachia. This is not normal. They know it in their bones, and I call it the greatest lie ever told, because it's literally the collapse of the Holocene. Our entire era of civilization is essentially at this point done. We need to get ready for it and prepare, which we can do a lot of good stuff. But like, when that shit hits, like, you are going to see a bolt of anger towards our news media, government, and the industry that is going to be like nothing the world has ever seen. When people realize how much they've been lied to by the New York Times, MSNBC, CNN, BBC is terrible with climate.
Yeah, that's when it scares the shit out of me. Like the concept of like eco-fascism, right? Like once Republicans, especially the ones that are not yet in power, because I think that it'll throw out a lot of the people that are currently in power, but once they realize, oh no, climate change is a threat, once they fully accept that, right? Like the next thing is like, and we need to put up walls to make sure that people that are in countries that are far more affected by climate change than we are at this moment don't come in. And it's like, fuck, this is gonna get bleak. Like, I mean, bleak for multiple reasons, but also like you can see the ideology bending around it, I feel like.
I mean, I don't know what's bleak about the movie Children and Men, except with
one of my all-time favorites, covering in December, by the way.
Come on for that one.
With way worse weather. What's bleak about that?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. we got. Are we gonna read that super chat?
Oh yeah, so we have a super chat. Wait, Tony, you want to do your thing?
Minutes. I can hear
Yeah. I mean, like, sure. So you hit on earlier with we really did have everything, didn't we? Line, but I think you made and I mean this as a compliment, fundamentally hopeless and nuanceless movie for nuanceless times. And for me, I feel like it was a kind of a Dr. Strangelove style indictment of crisis, chosen facts, and like the politicization of everything, and was done very effectively and almost uncomfortably for a lot of people. And the sledgehammer of satire is one of the reasons why it works so well, to my taste. It was very effective. Was there ever any temptation to soft sell it, though?
Yeah, early on in the edit room, we kind of just started doing what we do. There was more cuts, there was more artful moments, and we started screening, and I was like, this isn't the movie. I was like, we're really telling the story of your house is on fire, get the fuck out of your house.
Right. Yeah.
And that's not a clever story. In the age of clever, this movie is really about how we've out-clevered ourselves. That careerism, siloed incentives, awards, all that kind of junk is distracting us from the most human of reactions, which is it's Jennifer Lawrence. Holy shit, a comet is going to hit the planet. I remember my editor, who's literally one of the great editors of all time, Hank Corwin. He'd done like Tree of Life. He'd worked on JFK.
Nice,
he did The Big Short. And he was like a little uncomfortable with it. And I go, this has to be a populist, show the pit stains of sweat under your shirt movie. And we talked a lot about Dr. Strangelove. And I was like, have you seen Dr. Strangelove lately? It is super silly, super obvious. And he's like, no, it's brilliant. And then he watched it and he was like, you're right.
Yeah.
And so we edited the whole movie to be more of a comedy, to be more absurd and crazy. And then we edited the ending to be more heartbreaking. And I told him, I go, look, this is how I'm experiencing the world. It feels like a farce, an over-the-top farce, with like a brutal, tragic ending. And then he got into it. And by the end, he was like, this is great. And I was like, Hank, we're going to get bad reviews, right? He's like, what do you mean? Hank still, a lot of people still care about that in the award. And God bless Hank. I mean, we're getting shitty reviews, dude. Like, we're making fun of the New York Times, Morning Joe, CNN. We're mocking the Manhattan, like with Kate Blanchett. We're mocking liberals with Leonardo DiCaprio's "I can work from within the system" bullshit. Like,
it's about you guys.
Yeah, there's just no way. And he's like, "You're wrong. You're wrong." And then when the movie came out, the reviews came in and it was like, "You were right."
But Adam, I want to thank you so much for coming on. I know you have to go.
Yes.
This was great. This was amazing. So thanks so much for joining us tonight.
You're more than welcome to come back whenever you want.
I would honestly love to. Such a pleasure. And if you ever want to do like an individual movie that either I recommend or you want to hear me.
Come on for Nancy Cabirio. Let's talk Fellini.
I mean, that is. Have you guys ever done Over the Edge?
No. Ooh, I would love to.
That we have to do. All right.
Over the Edge?
I'm pushing my sweaty self into your world.
It's an easy push. Yeah.
We should almost do Over the Edge and River's Edge because they're
all the. We'll call it the Edging Expanded Universe.
Everybody was the Edge.
They're both Tim Hunter.
River's Edge is great.
Tim Hunter wrote or directed River's Edge.
Yeah.
Wrote Over the Edge, and they both have this kind of bleak. The children have been forgotten kind of perspective.
It's certain like teen world thing that you rarely see in movies. I agree. I think that's both remarkable choices.
Anyway, you guys are awesome. Thank you for having me. And
thanks so much for coming on.
Yes.
It's been a pleasure.
Can you play 400 Blows as my outro? We're
Oh,
live.
hell yeah,
so
we
I
can. No, I'm on it. I'll find the yes on that
I'm
for
way
sure.
into lately, and I think they've already broken up, but I bumped into a band from like 5 years ago. Have you ever heard the Screaming Females?
Yeah, I'm friends with them. Yeah, amazing. Marissa has a new band called Noun, and they're just as amazing. Yeah, they just toured with our best friend band Lung. I just saw them like a couple months ago. They're great.
I am obsessed with
Get
her.
Adam on Protonic Reversal, Conan.
I know, right? Yeah. I haven't. I had Marissa on like years ago. It's been a while, but
Tell her I'm obsessed with her. She's
my God.
brilliant. If our culture hadn't been squashed, she would have been a giant star and been miserable. So maybe she's lucky that she's had this interesting career. But I can't believe you know her.
She's like one of the most amazing guitar players, and she's like, 5 foot nothing, and like just sitting there just shredding. First time I saw her, I can't say I actually saw her because the stage was so short that like I saw the top of her head, but I heard her wailing. That's what I heard. That was a long time ago. I was like, I can't believe, like, where's this? How many guitarists are in this band? Oh, just the one. Wow.
She is. I'm telling
you, amazing.
It like off the charts, brilliant. Her
Hell
vocals too, really unusual. Kristina,
I want to trade mixtapes with you, Adam. This is amazing.
Kristina, thank you so much. Yeah,
I know. I literally was like, oh my God, one of my favorite directors ever is following me on Twitter. I'm going to shoot my shot and ask him to come on a film podcast I co-host.
Well done.
Thanks, you guys.
All right. Thanks so much.
All right. Be well.
Bye.
All right. Well, so do you want to play it? We can do Root of Our Nature by 400 Blows if you want to. I think he did specifically ask for it. Actually, that wasn't the one that was in Talladega Nights. I'm trying to remember which one it was. It's been a while, but
I mean, it'll demonetize us, I'm sure, if we.
Oh, darn it, man! YouTube
never
lets us any fun.
Yeah, you want to do 400 letterbox one-liners though?
400 letterbox one-liners. Sure, of course. Letterboxd is a social media site for film lovers stuck at, with, and to each other about films they love, maybe the films they didn't love, maybe the films that they just wanted to excessively quote over and over and over again.
Being a teenager was like when Step Brothers came out.
Yeah, I'm sure. And of course, all these are best expressed succinctly. Everyone gets to have their say, but to keep it short, you keep it timely, and not just Siskel's and neighbors of the world chiming in. Everyone gets to chime in and opine. These are collected weekly by myself. Not usually for one movie. In this case, it's for a bunch of movies. These are the letterbox one-liners for most of Adam McKay's career. Let's go, Forrest. So for Don't Look Up. Seriously, though, why did that general charge Jennifer Lawrence for the free snacks?
Dude, it's such a great, like, comedic sequence, like the comedic repeating joke or whatever. It's just every time the story kind of slacks, she's like, and then he knew that they were free, but he guards does, and it works so well.
It really does work.
Bleak movie.
Again, for Don't Look Up, Washed on Acid. I do not recommend this.
That's when you take the Xanax to calm your nerves.
That sounds like an absolute nightmare. Big Short. How work presentations should be. Cerebral and informative, but fun.
I remember that one from when we actually did we did it. Yeah.
That's right. It's like go back to March or whenever we did that episode for that. Again, Big Short, another one of these. I love it when Barbie and Ken explain to me about the economy and how home mortgages and stocks work.
Yeah, baby.
You know what's funny? Kristina bounced out of doing The Big Short, and I think
that's right. It was Chris Ferry.
Yeah, and we pulled that one for her, if I remember correctly, and then we were like, shit, like she was gonna be on.
I was like, I was
gonna stream from the bathtub like Margot Robbie, so
missed out.
Let's redo that one.
Missed out on multiple reasons.
This is for Vice. Every MSNBC liberal who simps for Liz Cheney should be forced to watch this movie, Clockwork Orange style.
Hard agree.
Yes, especially now.
Agreed. Another one for Vice. Imagine a heart transplant allowing you to live long and see a movie come out about how badly you fuck things up for an entire country in your lifetime.
Well, in the words of Dick Cheney, he's a dick.
There you go. This is Talladega Nights. All NASCAR drivers should make out after the race.
Agreed. Yes. Yeah. That'll make the gays want to watch.
That's how we heal the divide. That's how we heal the divide of our nation.
That's right.
Between liberals and conservatives.
The other guys, Michael Keaton as the captain is one of the funniest things in the film. The scenes where he quotes lines from TLC songs, even though he doesn't know who they are just hilarious.
Don't go chasing waterfalls, yeah.
We ain't too proud to beg over here, okay? And we gotta creep. Okay?
Exactly. Step Brothers, I got a boats and hose sweater to wear for Christmas this year, so it felt it was time to rewatch this masterpiece. I like that one.
Boats and hose.
I like that one. Anchorman, dude had a flute up his arm the whole date. Absurd.
He loves jazz flute.
He's ready at any given moment in time. Those are Letterboxd one-liners for the films of Adam McKay, our guest tonight. That was a weird sentence to say, but cool. Please follow the show at Movie Night Extra at our Letterboxd HQ account, where there's stories and additional content for all the many things we do on this show and many other things. You can follow us on there, interact with us, all that good stuff. Lots more cool things coming there. Forrest, not going to call him Dad. He's always Flacco on Letterboxd, and you can follow him there as well. At Conan Neutron is apparently Adam McKay's mixtape buddy. That's me, and you can. I'm following the highbrow, the midbrow, the populist fair, all that stuff. Criterion Challenge is over. New one starting up. KT and I both going to do it. We're going to live stream our choices, so that should be exciting. Speaking of KT, at Movie Runtime down there, she's covering all the stuff she does on her show as well as this show and any other shows that she happens to be on and doing. She'll follow her on Letterboxd to see her filmic exploits on that platform. That is a tough sentence to say, too. And then, of course, Kristina. Adam Kristina. Is that a TLC reference? I don't know. You have to go to her Letterboxd to find out. Boom. Got their ass.
Christina is chasing waterfalls.
She is indeed chasing waterfalls. The only way to find out is to follow her on Letterboxd as well. Let's hit it with the plugs.
If you're watching us on YouTube, please like and subscribe, and then hit the bell to get notified whenever we're streaming. And we'd humbly request that you watch the video to the end, because it helps us with the algorithm and helps more film fans to discover the show. We're also monetized. If you want to get your chat questions definitely read on stream, you can always send us a super chat, which will help us keep the show going. Every cent helps. If you're watching on Twitch, you can gift us a free sub on Amazon Prime with your Prime membership, but getting subs on Twitch is always appreciated, and it helps to follow us on there as well. We also have an audio feed, which is available wherever you download podcasts, if you prefer to listen to podcasts rather than watch the stream. That's updated usually the same day we stream, but watching on YouTube and Twitch is the best way to get the show first, live as it happens. If you want to support us with a monthly donation and get access to all of our after parties forever, which go patron only after we do them, you can become a patron at patreon.com/movie night extra. Link is in the description for that. It really helps us keep the show going since we do have some expenses to make this happen. We also have a Discord community. Link is in the description for that. We sometimes watch movies we cover on there. We get into conversations about everything from film to TV shows to related podcasts. We even have a Discord channel for memes. It's really fun on there. You can find us on all the social media platforms: Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, Twitter, and Threads. You connect with us on all of those. Talk to us. We'd love to hear from you. Lastly, we recently made a TikTok at Movie Night Extra where we're putting up short-form clips from the episodes. Okay, passing this to Conan so he can tell you about his music and this week's Protonic Reversal. Conan, who's on Protonic this week?
Yeah, no Protonic this week because I just got back from tour and boy are my arms tired. But Michael Crane of Dead Cross Retox and Cunts up this weekend for a new episode. The Kino Motel just dropped into the general feeds, and Steve Moriarty of the Gits and the Gits book coming up next. So Protonic Reversal, Patreon, $1 a month advance access for all that good stuff. NeutronFriends.bandcamp.com for remaining merch items not sold on tour, as well as all the records and all that good stuff. No shows till 2025. Nothing to announce right now other than that.
I want to let you know that when we had the plugs video on there, right? And then I was like, we're gonna pass this off to Conan. I at the last minute realized since Conan's not here, and I was ready to go with announcing your tour date.
You had it?
Yeah. So I had it up.
Nice.
I did it flawlessly. I was like, boom.
Yeah, nailed that shit. Boom.
I was like, Conan's not here, but you can go to his show tomorrow in Chicago.
Yeah.
That's a gift sunglasses drop moment. That's good. That's awesome. Chicago show rock, by the way. That was actually one of my favorites of all.
Ravana.
Friend of the show, an actual friend, Ravana, came out to that one as she has for many other ones. We will see her in next month for my birthday show.
Hell yeah.
And she just had a birthday too, so.
She did. It was her birthday at our show. She spent part of her
Oh.
birthday at our show, which is very humbling. And we're also going to have her on for Lost Highway.
I just imagine that her birthday is a full day where she gets like more and more tipsy, and eventually they're just carrying her around in sunglasses to your show. So there's like she has her friends going like, yeah,
Like Weekend at Bernie's style. That's good. That's good. Anyway, that's what I got. I have so many tour stories, so much to talk about. If we're doing an after party, I can talk about that or not. It's fine, whatever. It's this tour.
I mean, if you want to do it, we can. But I gotta soak my foot while we do it.
I didn't need that information, but I appreciate it nonetheless. Kristina, what do you got?
Nothing. For those who don't know, I'm going through a lot right now, like personally, mentally. So like streaming is kind of like on like back burner for me. But I'm gonna get more like mentally better, more mentally fit, and get ready and sue a dude over voyeurism. But anyway.
All right. Well, KT, what do you?
any non-litigation news, or is that it?
Yep, that's it.
In trial news this week.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, my mom and I we're gonna live stream our Christmas decorating next weekend.
That'll be nice. That'll be nice.
Could have led with that, but all right.
That's like the way that you explain like all the stuff that's been going on to like your grandma or something at Thanksgiving, and she's like, that sounds nice. That sounds like.
Bless your heart.
KT, what do you got?
I had a premiere at noon today. My first ever all video episode of What If I Don't Like It, which means that you get to see everyone who's talking the whole time. Bonnie is on camera with me. We did the 2 little circles like you're seeing right now. Yeah, it was really, really fun. We broke format a little bit and this was bound to happen. I can't believe we made it all the way to the final episode. By the way, it is the final episode of season 1 for What If I Don't Like It.
Season 2.
Who gets killed? Who gets killed? No, sorry.
Season 2 starts. You are the opener for season 2.
Season 2 opener.
So,
there you go. Sounds better.
Season 2 opener, which will be the next episode on the 1st of December. Kristina and I are going to talk about Wicked. I'm going to have her on so that she can opine.
I guess it has to be out first, huh?
I've got such a great... Well, I need her a little bit first because I haven't seen it, so I need her to hype me up and tell me what I need to know. Set that stage. It can't be anyone else in my friend group who could possibly set the stage better than this person. We have right here. What a world! So she's going to open up season 1 with me.
Yeah, uninterrupted.
Yeah. No, uninterrupted, talking about musicals with no shame. And so, but the one that just
shame is not a very nice nickname for Conan. Come on.
Catch Shame on tour. Oh no, that's over.
That's a good band name though.
Shame. There has to be a band called Shame, right?
Yeah,
Shame. They're a Jewish klezmer band. So Bonnie came on and she finally watched Interview with a Vampire, but she showed up having already watched the episode before we did part 1. So it's just one huge big part.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. So it's just different. And I'm exploring some different formats, changes as we go into the next season, because why not? We're hitting season 2.
Why wouldn't you?
Yeah. And that's it. That's for me right now, is celebrating a whole full season of my first ever podcast.
Well, very good.
I was on twice. Once talking about Wizard of Oz.
Me too.
And once talking about why can't I remember Keanu Reeves and
Point Break.
Why can I never remember any movie name title once I've done it? I feel like we do it, we talk about it, and then
you just delete that information from your brain.
You're gonna forget we had Adam McKay on now for us? What the hell?
Just the title.
Like, oh, who's this guy? We're over here doing River's Edge. I don't know who this guy is.
Well, no, I'll be fine because there's no title to it, right? Like it's just the title of whatever movie I want.
Oh, I see.
I delete all in my mind.
We appreciate the addendum. Thank you.
So
new watchers and viewers and like listeners and whatnot, hit that like and subscribe button if you tuned out during the automated thing, because we do this a lot. It's just as entertaining, if not more. Actually, it's more entertaining. The other episodes are definitely better. This one is like
We have
That was pretty good. I thought it was good.
Yeah, I thought it was
They're
great. We
more
did get a
movie-based.
super chat question.
It's a different
$10.
format, but
Can I read this?
And
Since
I
know
wanted
prisoners
to give Kristina the chance to respond to this one, because have y'all seen The Apprentice with Sebastian Stan and Jeremy Strong? It's well, the soundtrack sort of reminds me of the American Psycho soundtrack.
I saw, and the director Ali is very, very progressive, very left leaning as well, and it would be cool to have him on discuss some of his films one day. But I thoroughly enjoyed Sebastian Stan's portrayal of Trump because it was not a parody, it wasn't an oppression. I mean, there's clips of him going viral. He got like the cadence down perfectly. He ate ramen with soy sauce to gain weight in a month and a half instead of drinking beer. Yeah, like. And I mean, it's kind of.
I eat ramen. I eat soy sauce. All right,
Yes.
it might poke me up.
I think the impressions are not going to be funny anymore for a long time, unfortunately.
Yeah, and that's why this movie is coming out at the perfect time, because it reminds people of like how Trump got to where he is. We got to thank fucking Roy Cohn for that. But I do think maybe Sebastian's with a very, very slow, bland Oscar season, he's probably going to be up for an Academy Award at best, probably. I mean, I do highly recommend this movie if you're someone who's like, I want to know how Trump came to be, like why, like how he got to where he is today. And I'm like, yeah, this movie's definitely, if you want to, learn a thing or two, like, yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah,
I did see the other Sebastian Stan movie, A Different Man, which I quite enjoyed, and it's crazy that it came out almost exactly at the same time.
Yeah.
What did you think of the soundtrack, though, Kristina? Did it remind you of American Psycho?
Yeah, it did. It did. Interesting. It's like some of the songs I'm like, oh my, like, I think that this film is pretty good. Like, a lot of people are, at first it was a bit of a slow burn, but now that Trump is going to be our president again, I think more and more people are going to probably tune into this, like, when it hits streaming.
Yeah.
So,
I hate the fact that,
he's president again. Me too.
Yeah. I mean, a brave opinion, right?
So brave. Yeah.
So brave.
You'll hear brave opinions like no other.
Exactly. Cool.
Yeah. So we're gonna jump to an after party in a few minutes. I'm gonna call it the Shake and Bake after party.
There you go.
Perfect.
So thank you so much to Adam McKay for joining us. And
that was so awesome.
Yep,
so
I'm so glad I did what
He
I
liked
did.
us. He really liked us.
He really liked us.